Welcome to the Caper All-Decade Team, Caper Basketball Edition, men's basketball. We're going to have a great chat this morning here. Hope everyone enjoys it. Ron Shaw's with me, of course, veteran of the basketball game, to say the least, here at Cape Breton, longtime coach, of course, of the Riverview Royals girls program and been around the Caper programs for a long time. Head coach on his second stint, Matt Skinn, with us as well. And spoiler alert, one of the all-decade team members, Meshach Lufile. So great to have Meshach with us. Of course, no stranger to Caper athletic fans. One of the greats, certainly, that's come through the men's basketball program. So thanks again, fellas, for joining me, and I know the fans will enjoy it. First, maybe, Matt, we'll start with a little overview about how I know Sean Randy with athletics come up with this idea and came to us with it. Take me through how you came up the list, and maybe who chipped in to give you some idea on what route to take.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Corey. We appreciate you mediating these talks, first of all. Great addition to CBU Capers Athletics for us and what you've been doing online and writing with us. So we appreciate that, first of all. Basically, we put together a group of people, including the current coaching staff, former coaches, and as well as the administration here, to put together 10 players who we felt fit with the all-decade team. Obviously not an easy task, and there was lots of back and forth about who should be joining and who shouldn't be joining, what some of the criteria were as far as players being able to be on the team. But we felt we did our best to kind of encapsulate what the decade meant to Capers men's basketball, and we're excited to present this moving forward.
Ron, talk a little bit from your end, your involvement, and I guess how, as Matt mentioned, it wasn't an easy task to pick these teams.
Certainly not. We had a couple of spirited discussions, and my memory was jogged on a couple of guys for sure. And again, difficult. A couple of guys on the list, I got to be honest, I wouldn't have been as familiar with. I kind of put that on Matt's shoulders. Certainly knew them more by reputation at the time, because a couple of guys that when I was coaching in other places, I didn't get to see as much. But I mean, when I look at the list and think of how hard it was, I know one thing that stands out to me, and the guys that I know of, not only were they great players, but they were great people. And to me, that's a big part of the criteria, I think, as well.
Meshach, talk a little bit about, of course, you have the player's perspective, and you've played with her and known a lot of the players on this list. I guess first, we'll get to you more later, but how you feel to be part of this team, and about some of the others on the list.
I mean, for me, it's an honor. Obviously, I'm definitely a proud Caper. I'm actually rocking my sweater, the alumni that they brought for me. I think it's special. For me, I don't know how many pros we've had come out of Cape Breton. And I don't know how much, proud pros we've had come out of Cape Breton. So for myself, I'm a person, I'm really proud of where I came from. And, like I said, I wouldn't be where I am today without playing at CBU, going through the ups and downs there. So, after I left, I've been trying my best to just, shed a good positive light, within the program. And obviously with Matt returning at the helm for his second year after going to Calgary, you can see the team, they've reloaded, they look pretty good. So I think we've done a good job, and just, to be recognized on this list for me is dope. It's cool. Like, I think as a graduate of a school, you always want to be, recognized, as an alumni. So I'm definitely honored for sure.
Okay, gentlemen, let's get into it. As we said, a lot of familiar names. People will have some memories jogged, certainly, about watching these gentlemen don the orange and green. We'll start again with the second team, and I'll begin, again, no particular order, just going through both teams. Matt, let's start with Kelson Devereaux.
I mean, great guy to start with. I think when you talk about what we're trying to do with Capers men's basketball, Kelson epitomizes that. First of all, he's a local product. He played at Riverview High School, played for Coach Shaw in high school, and was a 5-year player. And when we talk about 5-year players here, we talk about guys who we really don't have to worry about for the duration of their stay. They're going to get their studies done. They're going to be in the gym every day doing what they have to do. And when they're on the floor, they represent what we're trying to do here at CBU all the time. And Kelson is probably the best example of that, just how he gave everything that he had to the program and how he's moved on to be such a positive role model in the community and moved on to veterinary college now at UPI. I mean, just the epitome of what a student athlete is.
What about you, Ron, about Kelson?
Well, obviously a soft spot for Kelson, being one of our guys from Riverview, but a guy that came to work every day, loved the game, loved to play, committed himself totally. I mean, one of the things that stands out to me is the hard work Kelson put in on his body. He totally transformed himself out of high school, improved his strength. Just a glue guy, an all-around good guy. I think Meshach would probably agree that he was the ultimate teammate, very supportive and for all the guys, and just one of those guys who made those plays, those special plays. I think one of my fondest memories of Kelson, and I got to throw my guy Keon Morrison this one too, was that play at the towards the end of the AUS championship season. There was a flurry of activity. I thought that Kelson and Keon had made two of themselves. It looked like 4 guys there putting heat on the front court. And that's what Kelson was all about, just hard work, get the job done, great attitude, great leader, great teammate. One of the top guys for sure.
What about you, Meshach, about Kelson?
Kelson, well, I call him Thor. Another story, but Kelson's one of my favorite teammates I ever played with. Probably my favorite. To this day, probably my favorite pick and roll partner. Whenever I'd be in the pick and roll with Kelson, I'd never have to worry. Like Coach Ron said, because of his strength, being able to switch, being quick on his feet, a guy that when I came in my first year, worked tirelessly. Kelson worked till he couldn't almost breathe. Positive guy. Became I thought the best defender on our team the last 2 years. We always coach would put him on, some of the, perennial players like a Tyler Scott or a Marquise. And he did his job. He did his due diligence. I think Kelson definitely deserves to be on this team, not only for his skill and his work ethic, but also the character of a person. He rarely ever complained. He never let a bad game really affect him that much. And he's just a great person. So yeah, my fondest memory of Kelson, I think we played PI in the preseason game. And I remember we'd always leave Kelson open. And coach was always harping on Kelson, shoot the ball. And I think Kelson made like a bunch of threes. And I just remember hearing down the bench, Coach Matt yelling, leave him open this year. We definitely should have won that year. We fell short, but Kelson had a phenomenal season that year. He played really well, and he became an integral part, of our rotation as a starter. So,
just quickly for me, as you guys know, I have a perspective from being on the sideline for some great games against your rival St. FX, of course, over the years. And Kelson, along the lines of what you said, Ron, there was always seemed to be one. He didn't necessarily fill the stat sheet, of course, but there was always one play during the game, could be a defensive, a hustle play that you knew that was going to be key. And of course, I always enjoyed seeing the Capers because I knew it was such a rivalry game, and we had some dandies over the last decade that we'll touch on throughout this. But yeah, Kelson Devereaux is just one of those players. I bet you if you polled Caper fans, he would be up there as one of the favorites over not only the past decade, but since it became an AUS program. So congratulations to Kelson, certainly well-deserved second team. Now we'll move on. Cedric Casongo.
Yeah, I mean, as Ronnie has a soft spot for Kelson, I got a soft spot for Seti. We're both from Welland, Ontario. We both played at the same high school. We both played for Coach Mike Rayo. I mean, just a warrior. I feel bad for Seti in a way because I don't think the true potential of his career was really felt. He kind of struggled with injuries and, a lot of them unfortunate and unlucky at times. But the one thing about Seti that I think everybody could say was if it was a big game, he showed up. And it didn't matter if that meant guarding somebody who was, a different position than him or, having to play a different position maybe that he wasn't as comfortable with. I mean, he played point guard for us for a couple of years, and I don't think that was not his natural position. But if there was a big game, he showed up. And I think he had a playoff game that he had 20 points and 18 rebounds. And, when we did win the AUS championship, he was pivotal, in our rotation. And I think he was one of those guys that I feel like I had a lot of faith in, and even if he was having a bad game, we would draw plays for him to take the shot at the end of the game. He was just a guy who would show up. And again, I know Coach Shaw probably touched on this, but how he changed himself over the course of his career was pretty incredible. He went from being a guy in our first trip to Ontario, my first year and his first year here. He went from kicking chairs at the end of the bench and being like a disturbing, teammate as far as a guy who was thinking more about himself to being like the consummate leader on the team and being able to relate with the guys from, the last guy on the team to the best player on the team. And he was just a pleasure to have around. And he did a lot of things as well, unlike Kelson. It wasn't necessarily on the floor, but a lot of things off the floor that when you're involved with a program every single day, you understand why a guy like him can be so valuable for you.
I absolutely agree. When I think about the first time I saw Seti, when Matt brought him in, walked in the gym, he was hobbling around, just, rehabbing from serious knee surgery. Obviously, had put some weight on, and I'd be honest, I raised an eyebrow. I was like, what the heck? What's this guy going to bring to the table? And what he did to recover and regain his fitness and really mature as an individual. As Matt said, that first going off, he was very, I don't know how to really describe, and I wouldn't say inside himself, but, had trouble playing to the next moment. You always talk about the next play. And that's something that, I spent a lot of time talking to Seti about, and the improvement personally for him in that area was just fantastic. And he became, like Matt said, so versatile. He played out of position a lot of times. I could still remember, when we at time we needed that extra bucket, we used to run that play where Seti would come off that baseline, I dare say the word flex screen, and settle in the post on the far side. He'd just stop in the post, and he was a wide buy. That was a bucket for us, right? But again, a glue guy, a huge part of our leadership group as his career went on, and just another great character guy.
Me and Cedric actually related. I remember, the first time I played against Cedric was in high school when Assumption, we played Notre Dame, and he had kicked our butt. Cedric was a phenomenal high school player, phenomenal. And like Coach Skin said, his potential was never fully reached because of injury. I remember when he ended up coming to Cape Breton, and Matt had told me he came in, he looked like 350 pounds. And what Cedric did, I don't think a lot of people understand what he actually did. Cedric was getting up at like 5 or 6 in the morning and going to the track and running every single day before school started, literally by himself in the dark, just getting over there, running. Dropped a tremendous amount of weight, like Coach Skin and Coach Ron said, was a guy that was super just in himself and a little bit self-centered in the beginning, but turned into a leader. Could relate to every single person on the team, was a mentor to me. He definitely was, although on our team I was the leading scorer most of the year, Cedric was definitely the voice. He was definitely the voice in the leadership. And he's one guy that I look to to give me, wisdom. He was kind of like the extension of Coach Matt on the floor for us. And like Coach Matt said, he had a tremendous game when I remember that game when he had 20 and 18, 22 and 18, I think. And he's had some big games, some game winners for us, and just how he was able to transform his body. And he was one of the guys that left and became a pro. Said he played in Italy and had a tremendous first season. 2 years, injured himself, is getting back out there now. But yeah, Cedric's definitely one of my favorites, and he's definitely deserves to be on this as well.
Matt, isn't, of course, with a varsity program, it's wins and losses, and playing for titles, of course, are all part of it. But ultimately, at the university level, it's about stories like Cedric's of the person developing, I guess, the not cliche, but the ultimate student athlete, that it went beyond just his accomplishments on the floor.
Yeah, I think what we really try to do is work a little bit harder to get the right person. We feel people with high character can achieve more, and it was always in there for Cedric. And I think the key with Cedric was getting him to realize how much his teammates cared about him and wanted to see him succeed, as you can hear Mishak talking about him. And when you think about yourself and get down on yourself in instances during games, that affects your teammates. And if your teammates care about you, they see that and they want to try to help you and try to make things better. And that takes away from their efforts on the floor. And once he kind of realized that and realized that everybody had his back, he was able to really turn the corner. And like Mishak said, he's moved on and just become a great player, studying to be a paralegal right now. Lots of great things happening for him moving forward.
Next player on our second team list.
Just one second.
Sure.
I didn't know anybody else was coming in today. I had to shut the door of my office.
Scott Jasper Speyer.
Yeah, Scott for me, he was really close to like that intermediary between when I finished playing and when I started coaching. Like it was right in there. And so he played with a few guys that I played with here at CBU. And the biggest thing about Scott is he was, when you think about the great teams that CBU had in those days, as a starter, he might have been the last person that you thought about in a lot of ways, but he was just the guy who kept everybody together and was just a force inside. I would say overall he's probably a little bit undersized, but he was just so wide and had such long arms and had good touch around the rim. And again, he was a guy who was an academic All-Canadian here, who's moved on to be a teacher now in Alberta, and just a phenomenal guy who stays in touch with the program constantly, wants to be involved, and a guy who, if you mention on campus, is somebody that the professors, the staff on campus, everybody just kind of raves about. Just a tremendous guy.
Again, Scott Unforsen was a guy I didn't really get to know personally. It was not my time in the coaching staff, but got to see him play a bit. But certainly by reputation, all thumbs up. A huge glue guy, a huge character guy, well respected around the athletic department and in the university, as Matt said. And from my recollections of his playing, was being a guy that made the best of what he had to work with. He maximized his skill set. Like Matt said, a big, wide body, solid around the hoop, nice touch. And again, a guy that you might say, "Oh, that guy starting?" But it was clear he had a role in the team that was very, very significant through his leadership and again the maximizing of his skill package.
Yeah, I didn't personally know Scott, but one thing about Scott was that when I got recruited my first year to Cape Breton, he was the first guy to reach out to me, just in terms of like telling me about the program, how it was going to be. And he was actually on campus when I came for like a day or two. We had like a little scrimmage when Coach Charters was there, and I remembered just guarding him. and I remember him throwing this massive elbow, and I think I saw my life flash before my eyes, and I just completely ducked. He was like Coach Matt said, he was a wide body, he was a strong kid, and he just played, he just played hard from what I noticed, and he played with some dogs, Scott. Playing with, like Matt said, those great, caper teams, like, the Paris Carters and those guys, the Dorseys, the kind of personalities that I think he was surrounded by was probably difficult. But I think for him to survive and to be able to be the glue guy for them speaks highly of his character. And I heard about Scott's name a lot, especially my first year coming in, because, everyone was like, oh, you're the new big man on campus, and, Scott this, Scott that. So I've only ever heard good things about Scott. So
Next on our second team list, Kenny Jean-Louis.
I think the best thing that sums Kenny up was his recruiting trip. I said, Kenny, this is your last day here. I'm going to take you out for a meal anywhere you want. I gave him a list of restaurants. I said, take your pick, whatever you want. We want you here so badly. Where do you want to go? And he kind of thought about it, looked at the list, and he said, let's go to Burger King. and and as soon as that happened, I felt like we were going to get him, because he was just like that. That was the type of low maintenance he was, as far as who he was as a person sometimes. But then on the court, he turned out to be one of the better players in the league over his time here. And I mean, just what a personality to have. I think he was very highly touted as a recruit. I mean, Kenny went from being the MVP at the 2015 national the under 15 national tournament, to winning another nationals with the under 17 team, with Team Quebec. And he was just this very highly touted guy. And when he came in, there was some very good players here that he was playing with. And he knew that he kind of had to take a step back and play a role. And then, as he kept moving forward and playing, he ended up being our team MVP one year. And it was just because that year, it was kind of how he went, we would go. And he had some of the craziest stat line games in the history of the AUS, actually. Has the AUS record for most assists in a game. Mishak would like to say you're welcome, I'm sure, to that. But just like, again, the versatility that he had at 6'5", played the 1 through 4, could guard the 1 through 4, and he was just out of the gym competitive as well, and in practice too. Like when he started mumbling to himself in French as a francophone, you knew something was good was going to happen. And that happened in practice all the time as well. Like it legitimately happened all the time. And he was just, as Mishak said, a dog. Like he just worked and worked and worked. And he's one of my all-time favorite people as well. Like he's another guy that stays in touch with the program, who's very proud of being a part of things at CBU, has moved on to be a teacher, did his master's degree after finishing here. And he went to go play at the University of Ottawa for a year. And man, just it's hard to put into, again, he's another guy that's kind of hard to put into words, but his stats do kind of speak for themselves too, because he had some great games.
Well, I would say arguably the greatest laugh of all time, CBU basketball. You could hear Kenny laugh in the parking lot, as they say. I mean, just a great personality, and as a player, Coach Skin nailed it. I mean, competitive beyond. It was on. And he said when him and Seth would start talking to each other in French, you knew it was on, right? It was a competitive situation, but Kenny came again, a lunch bucket guy in a lot of ways. Always extremely hard worker in practice and in games. If we're doing running drills, Kenny was always giving it. And I mean, who could forget that night in St. X in 2016 when he dropped 16 assists on the X-Men, and I guess a bunch of those were also to you, Meshach, for sure. You helped him out in that regard, but again, a great guy, a guy we're very proud of. Again, he's become an educator of children, and how nice is that to see a guy we're very proud of, but a competitor, played both ends of the floor. Again, all around great guy. Again, character guy, absolute character guy.
Yeah, he was a guy too that, didn't necessarily have the best reputation as far as a student, when he came here, and wasn't the highest achieving student as well. So for him to kind of really take that turn and be able to go on to graduate school and become a teacher now after the fact, again, I just feel like it shows the type of character person he was, and he was able to use everything that he had here to his advantage.
Talk about a brother. I mean, I don't think I butted heads more with a player on that team than I did with Kenny. And I think the reason why is because Kenny was the only person on the team that could get me mad, but in a good way. Kenny brought a lot of dog out of me. He brought a lot of intensity. Probably my favorite teammate I had in terms of duo. I think the years I played with Kenny, we were probably the most deadliest duo. Our pick and roll was crazy because it wasn't just Kenny's ability to play multiple positions. Kenny was a very good passer, very, very good passer, very good at getting to the rim, getting to the seams. And he gave me, we can say that I gave Kenny a lot of assists, but he also gave me a lot of wide open, dunks or layups. And I remember that St. FS game vividly, and, the comeback we had. Kenny was a dog. Kenny wasn't the best defender, but Kenny gave everything when he guards someone. I remember him, picking up, I think it was Javon Master one possession. Kenny his hands just flying all over the place and just screaming, and and he'd get into it, and Kenny was raised. Kenny played with a lot of really good players from Quebec growing up, like really good players. Some of them, I think had chances in the NBA. Some of them are in EuroLeague, like, really good players. I just remember, Kenny's leap, the year Kenny sat out, which was my third year, I believe. And that year we just had Seth, Cedric, and myself and the rest of the guys. Kenny joined us in fourth year, instantly became one of the best players on the team. Was a guy that I knew I could go to war with. And it was just a tremendous player, high character guy, brought tremendous joy to our locker room. We'd always laugh every time Kenny would come in, and he'd start dancing and singing and playing his ridiculous French rap music. But he was just one guy. He was one guy that we loved, and one guy that now is one of my better friends since we left college. And I got mad love for Kenny. That's my guy for life for sure.
I think we were 100%. We had 100% winning percentage if Kenny either got into a fight or started clapping in somebody's face. I think we had I was always trying to get him to that level, but the times that he did that at X or at UMB or other places or at home, I don't think we lost when he really got into it like that.
One of those obscure yet important statistics that people don't often know.
Yeah, it's like you're as a coach, you're like, he got a technical. We don't like when guys, lose their cool. But then I always knew that we were going to win those games.
Mm-hmm.
So the final member of our second team, Sean McCormick.
I say this very openly, that Sean McCormick's my favorite player of all time. I've just known Sean for so long. I coached him on the under 15 team in Alberta. I coached him for 2 seasons on a club program in Calgary. And then to be able to have the pleasure of coaching him at CBU as well was, it was just incredible. You want to talk about a guy who was the most right on the edge player. He's the most on the edge player of all time. And for his teammates to be accepting of him and for what he was able to do as a player, is pretty incredible. He was one of the better rebounders in the league for his career. And he probably had the most intentional fouls and games suspended as well while he was here because of how he played. He face washed guys into the floor. He elbowed guys. He did that in practice too. And, a guy like shout out Shakir Locke, who came in as a freshman player and had to guard him every single day in practice. And he would literally get punched or pushed out of bounds multiple times in practice by Sean. And Shakir would just pop up and not say a word and keep playing. And I think that reflects kind of everybody on the team in a lot of ways. And we really want guys to be themselves when they're here, whatever that means. And Sean was just his own guy in a lot of ways. And the ultimate guy that you want to go to battle with, you talk about a foxhole, going to battle, all these cliche terms as a coach, but I mean, he was that guy. And the games that I really remember about Sean, I think the most impactful game that he had was the semifinal against X, the year that we won the AUS. Jimmy Dorsey, who I'm sure we're going to talk about here soon, he got 2 fouls in the first 2 minutes of that game, and Sean just took over. He did everything that game for us. He willed us to that win with his rebounding. He had a huge putback at the end of the game, just a bunch of offensive rebounds, and that was just kind of what he was all about. And I love that guy. And talk about a guy who I got into it with as a coach as well, that our coaching staff got into it because he was so intense. He wanted it so bad. And he would tell you that. He would tell his teammates that. And that's why I loved him as a coach, because you want a guy to push you as a coach as much as you feel like you're pushing your team. And I mean, like I said, I love Sean. He was the best.
When we were talking about Sean, one of the things I said was that I have never coached anybody like him, and I probably will never ever coach anybody like him again. He was a unique guy for sure. I mean, when we had Sean McCormick, we had something nobody else had. Mm-hmm. And that was a huge part of our success when Sean was around. I mean, in practice, challenging guys, working hard, and also the thing about Sean too, you can't forget his skill set. He was a great basketball player. Right. Oftentimes when the name Sean McCormick comes up, you talk about his toughness and this and the time he did that and how he did this and his suspension, but he was also a very good basketball player. And I think, initially going off, I'm sure a lot of the guys were going, whoa, what is this whirling dervish that Coach Skin brought in? But certainly very soon came to love him immensely. And again, a favorite of mine for sure was the times I wanted to, just wanted to take him. Sure, there was that time. And he would challenge you. I mean, I know in practice time, sometimes he'd come up to me and say, what's Coach doing? What's going on here? And he'd be challenges on that, but in a positive way too, just wanting everyone to be better and wanting nothing but the best for the team. But again, a guy who stays in touch, and it was great to see him last year at the AUS playoffs. A pleasure. And again, a guy who went on to become a very successful businessman. Yep. And again, something that I think certainly is worth pointing out. And that's, I think that's been a common thread. And a lot of the guys were talking about, what's life after CBU about for them. And we're very proud of each and every one of them, what they're doing.
Sean, definitely the emotional leader of our team. Both coaches had said, just a fiery personality type guy. I'm a big guy, and I don't have a lot of guys in my lifetime that challenged me, and Sean did not give a damn. He'd get in my face. He'd get in my face in the change room. We had a lot of deep, just late night talks. And I think Sean would always go and whisper in my ear, and he'd be like, man, you're the best big in the country. We need you to do this. We need you to do that. Especially that year, that championship year that we had, the year we were 19-1. I would say I probably was third, fourth fiddle, depending on the game. Obviously, we had Jimmy Dorsey. We had other guys on the team that showed up. We had a really good team that year. But Sean would always be really push yourself. And I think there was one game he had given me a pep talk. And I think the game I had, was it against UMB? I had 30 and 20 or something crazy. I against UMB. And that was the game that I really like learned to appreciate Sean. Like Coach Ron said, Sean's skill set was actually really good. If you watch the games, Sean was really good at the rim. He was an amazing rebounder, and not just a rebounder around the rim, just within space. He'd go get a rebound, could push the ball, could shoot the three. A lot of things Sean could do. Probably my favorite four-man that I've played with to date, just as a rebounding buddy and someone that I knew, would jump into a fight with any day. Sean backed down from absolutely nobody. And I remember the most famous memory of Sean was at St. Mary's. And Coach Matt, you probably remember this. When he got into it with a bunch of the players on the team after the game, and we actually had to be separated. But it just showed Sean gave us that edge, that toughness edge that no other team had, and understanding that if we were going to go into battle with some of the physically tougher teams like St. Mary's and Dalhousie, we had Sean, and he was there to make sure no team could feel like they could bully us. And that ultimately catapulted us to a finals win, championship over Arcadia. And in that game, I remember I was having a pretty good game, and Matt made the change to put Kelson and Sean to 4 and 5. And their defense against Owen, probably the best big in the country at the time, was phenomenal, and helped catapult us to that win. So Sean was he's an all-timer. Absolutely.
I think there's some famous Cape Breton hockey player, and I could be wrong by this, that jumped into the opposing team's bench and just started fighting everybody. Like that's kind of what Sean would do. Like he wouldn't care if there was 10 other guys and he was by himself. He would just jump in, and he was a beauty.
It was George Davis, but who would ever forget the night, just to finish up on Sean, I thought about this as we were talking. Actually, my wife reminded me of it the other day, of the time that Sean got split open at home, and he come off the floor, and the only thing like he just wanted to get taped up, didn't matter what it was. Anyway, ended up with a big thing of gauze in his forehead. I think it was like hockey tape around his head, and he was back out there, right? You couldn't hold the guy, couldn't hold him back.
As you gentlemen spoke, and what I always thought of him, and again, you have the games at St. Yvette's perspective, where he would be just in the middle of the mix, and to connect him, I guess the Cape Breton heritage, and Ron would understand the most, just being a Cape Bretoner, as well as you could put him in a coal mine, you could put him in the plant, and he would kind of that rugged, rough, that split open, that kind of the heritage of hard labor and hard work hard, play hard type of thing that Cape Breton's noted for. So John McCormick certainly would again fit in one of the coal mines or the steel plant back when they were running here in Cape Breton.
Yeah, he certainly endeared himself to the fans here with his lunch bucket work ethic, I guess you could say, for sure.
So that wraps our second team up. Again, the members of that team are Sean McCormick, Kenny Jean-Louis, Scott Jasper Spire, Cedric Casongo, and Kelsa Devereaux. So great group to be coming off the bench, let's say for sure, as the second team. We'll move on to the first team, and one of two current capers that made the cut, so to speak. We'll start with Paul Watson, Matt.
Yeah, Paul has become one of the most versatile players in the country. And again, another guy who's just an absolute pleasure to coach. I feel very fortunate to coach Paul every day. Everybody sees what he does in games. Nobody sees what he does on a day-to-day basis, and how he pushes everybody, and his competitive nature on a day-to-day basis is just incredible. I mean, we have to put things in context of where we are right now. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. Guys were late arriving to a campus that was late opening here at CBU. And, for 2.5 months, we've been practicing with a glimmer of hope that there might be a game or two. And Paul showed up every single day early and pushed everybody to be better. Paul is one of those guys who I think if people came to our practices, again, they would see how good he really is. And he's almost there for doing that in the league. There were some things that we've kind of asked him to do and maybe change a bit from his game over the last couple of years. And I think, it takes a little bit of time within like live games to be able to see those changes and to feel comfortable with those changes. And whenever we're ready to step onto the floor, I'm really excited for Paul, because just the work that he's put in, what he's going to bring. And he's just a guy who plays with a perennial chip on his shoulder as well. Like, he thinks that the world's against him. He thinks that everybody's doubted him, and just plays so hard. And I think he's the best defender in the country right now. He literally can guard 5 positions on the floor. He led the country in defensive rebounds for 2 years. He was the defensive player of the year for the conference. He's been an all-star in the conference. Just a great player and a great guy.
And you see that every day in practice. Like, I know sometimes we're in drills and we're half court, or we're getting doing some transition stuff, and Paul's getting his hands on these deflections and steals. And I mean, even his own teammates know what's going to happen, and he still does it. His defense and his rebounding is superb. Paul, one of those guys, when Coach Matt came back to the program and asked me to come on with him, and we were kind of evaluating, who was in camp and who had been there and who would like to see stick around. He was one of the guys that stood out, and him and another guy we're going to talk about in a minute as well, Ozzy. And I often say to them, we're so happy you guys stayed, because they've become the cornerstone of our program. And when you see Paul in practice, he's extremely coachable. He's one of those guys you can approach on any little things, about quickness of his shot, or getting on 2 feet, and the things that have, little technical things that you sometimes think these guys, might not be that, it's like I'm coaching a junior high team sometimes, if you know what I mean. I'm a big fundamental individual skill guy, and Paul buys into that stuff. Again, a guy that does so many things for us. Like Matt said, guard 1 through 4, 1 through 5 sometimes probably, and just goes out and gets the job done, and hates to lose. Competitive in practice. Like, some of the things we've been doing lately have been kind of small side games, and we've been playing this 3-on-3 and 3 full court game. It's been absolutely wild. And Paul, you swear we're playing for the we're playing for the ship when that's happening. So again, can't get enough of those guys. An all-timer.
Paul, didn't know much about him until Matt came. Watched him a lot when he originally came over, but when Matt was at Calgary, and he stood out to me. Just an energy, just the way I describe it, just a live body. Wherever he was, the ball was not safe, and whether that was rebounding or stealing. I remember his first year with Matt. I was overseas, I believe, and I remember following him. No, sorry, I was in Halifax, actually. I remember following him and just watching him play. And the first thing I said is, we would have loved to have that guy on our team when we were there. He can defend at every position, any quick guard, whatever. Very athletic, more athletic than people, I think, realize. He's a very good ball handler. Just being able to bring up the ball, run the offense. His IQ seems very... There's instances where I've watched where he almost seems like he knows the play is going to be made before it's made. And I don't think guys catch on to what he's trying to do, whether it's a pass, whatever, and they might make the wrong read. But he actually made the right one. They just didn't know he was going to make that read. That's what I picked up about him. And he's my favorite guy to watch on the team. Ozzy, I know he's explosive. Ozzy can score. Definitely. Ozzy's like a Lou Will. But Paul Watson, just like, a guy that was a defensive player of the year, and having Paul win that and just see how he did it was just amazing. Just a guy that I can tell was very fiery. I can see the relationship him and Ozzy have. I've never personally played against or with Paul, but I know he'd be a tough matchup. And just watching him playing some like little men's league here, I could just tell, like, if you don't know Paul, he might look quiet to you at first, and he seems to speak to himself sometimes. But I think when you put him within a battle, within a war, like Coach Ron says, he hates losing. And we've built kind of a little bit of a relationship. I've talked to him numerous times over social media, and we've talked, and I've told him a little bit things, what to do, and just told him how proud I am and stuff like that. And he's been really receptive. He's a guy that I think represents the CB program really well. And in his short time there, he's done a lot of really good things. Obviously, Defensive Player of the Year, All-Star, as well as leading defensive rebounding in the country. Paul's he's definitely delight in the team. He's one player that I would have loved to play with. Absolutely love to play with.
The three of you have teased our next first team member, Ozzy. Of course, that's Osman Ozzy Omar, the second of our two current capers on this all-decade team. So Matt, start us off with a little bit about Ozzy.
Yeah, I don't think either of them would be upset because they're best friends and have been best friends for, most of their lives. But, I mean, Ozzy's led the league in scoring the last 2 years. And again, he's a guy who is really coming into his own as a person as well. One of the more quiet people that I've ever coached. Very, very quiet, but not to the same outgoing level of competitiveness as like a Paul or a Sean, a very competitive guy, and he does it with his play, and he does it when he's on the floor. And again, he's another guy. If it's a big game, Ozzy's going to play well. He's going to show up, and he's going to give everything that he has. He watches so much game film on his own, so he knows what he's going to be able to get from different teams when he goes out and plays against them. And his work ethic is just, out of this world. The weight that he's put on as far as working on his body in the weight room, how he gets into the gym to get shots up on his own and with his teammates and do individuals, with the coaching staff. He's always early. He's always staying late. We could win a game at home, and he missed 2 free throws. And after our coaches meeting, after the game, you look into the gym, and he's in the gym getting shots up, right after the game, with his uniform shorts on, and just always ready to go. And again, he's just another guy who's just a pleasure to coach. Really fortunate to be able to have a player like him, and we feel like that he's just been unleashed and has now become one of the better guards in the country.
Yeah, blossomed is the word I would say. I mean, again, one of the guys that we were so pleased that stayed, and just to see him come into his own and really develop into the player that I don't know if people really realized how good Ozzy was. I know in some of the games I would have seen, I really wasn't in tune with how good Ozzy was, right? Works extremely hard, not afraid of the big moment. I mean, we'll take that shot, wants the ball in his hands in those situations. And that speaks volumes about Ozzy. Again, a great person, absolutely loved by his teammates, quiet, yes, but leads, not everybody's a rah-rah leader. Ozzy plays or leads through example, for sure. And again, when I think of Ozzy too, I also think that he continues to be an underrated player. Even though he's a 2-time scoring champion, I still feel that. And I think Ozzy carries that a little bit. And I think that's what he's almost like a quiet assassin, he's going to be there and he's going to say, hey, I'll show you, just give me my chance. I'll show you. And Coach Skin has certainly given him his chance, and he has absolutely taken the reins. And also when you think about him and Paul, just go back for a second, both academic All-Canadians. Yeah. And again, that's huge for us. And again, speaks to the care. I keep coming back to that. Coach Skin sometimes it's like he gets tired of me asking that question. We'll be talking about a potential recruit, and I'll always say, well, what kind of a guy is he? What's his coach say? What's what? And I think that's hugely important. And with Ozzy, it's just a pleasure to be around.
Yeah, you don't really last too long here if you're not a good guy, right, Mishak?
That is true. That is very true. Ozzy, wow. Another guy I would have loved to play with. You know, back when I played at CBU, we didn't have a ton of super explosive scores, especially after the Jimmy Dorsey era. We just had a lot of really good players, which made our team, you know, we were playoff contenders every year. We honestly had a championship roster every single year. We just fell short. But a guy like Ozzy would have been a really great addition. Ozzy's a tremendous scorer, you know, just like a Lou Will, a guy that can shoot the ball, can get to the rim, can do a lot of different things, just knows how to get a bucket. I remember watching the game against UMB and just like overseas losing sleep and just losing my mind. And I remember him taking that big shot, like Coach Ron said, like he wants the ball in his hands in those situations and him taking that shot and hitting it. And he had a lot of explosive games. And as much as Ozzy does damage on the offensive end, I think people also don't give him credit for his defense. I think he's a pest. You know, he's so live and so jumpy. I think sometimes it does get the best of him. But I think, you know, he has the potential to be a really good defender. And that comes with techniques and just knowing, you know, the person you're guarding as well. But underrated is something I would give him too, because I talked to a lot of AUS players. I talked to a lot of people around the country, and you don't hear Ozzy's name come up too much. And I don't know if that's a respecting. I don't know if it's because it's Cape Breton. I don't know what it is, but Ozzy's one of the better guards in the country, I think. You know, and people can call me biased, but that's how I feel. And I don't think he gets that respect that he deserves, but he's definitely a guy that I believe, you know, he has the ability to will a team to win with his scoring. You know, he's the type of guy where he can rack off 15 straight quick. He has that ability. So Ozzy definitely deserves to be on this list. He's definitely a guy, not only on the court, you know, he also runs a little brand, Pure Jump Media, and they do a lot of good stuff against, like, just against racism, but against other stuff, just beautiful content if anyone, you know, has a chance to check it out. Just the epitome of what it means to be, you know, a student athlete. Obviously, you guys talked about him being academic all Canadian, so he has the whole package to me. So
Our next first team member, going back to somewhat going from era to era here, back to Paris Carter.
Yeah, again, Paris was that same area, you know, in between when I was playing and when I started coaching here. But, you know, one of our committee members here who helped us choose was Lowell Cormier, and he was an assistant when I played and was a big part of recruiting Paris with Coach Charters. And, you know, he turned out to be one of the better players in the country. Like, this is a guy who played at a very high level Division I school. And then when he did show up to CBU, he set the single game record for most threes in a game. And just one of the best shooters that CBU has ever seen. And when you looked at him as a player, you would have never thought that was his game, you know, because he was about 6'4", 6'5", looked like he was a linebacker. But man, that guy could shoot from everywhere and could get hot in a hurry and had the green light and just had the ultimate confidence to be able to hit those shots, and was a conference all-star here. He was a guy who I got to know a little bit as well after I got the job here, and spoke with him quite a bit. And he was a guy who was very proud of his time at CBU as well. Loved being here, loved representing CBU, and was working and has worked hard to stay in touch and, you know, to help with the program in any way that he can. And I mean, for a guy from Baltimore, Maryland, to be able to be like that and to genuinely enjoy his time here, again, speaks, you know, very highly to the type of person that he was. And man, I wish I could have coached him, because, you know, having shooters like that, yeah, I probably would have let him shoot even more.
Again, a guy that I didn't have the pleasure of getting to know or coach, and so really can't speak to that too much. But I know a pure scorer for sure. I think I was looking at some some archive stats. I think he sits 10th or 11th all time in single game points scored with 46, I believe. So obviously a scorer. And like, it's interesting what Matt said, when you looked at him and saw him on the floor, you might not think that was his game, but it certainly was. And from everything I've heard about him, he's a fine guy. Again, in my mind, a pure scorer. And sorry, I can't really say too much about him other than that, but I know he could score the ball and could shoot the three like crazy for sure.
Paris was one of those guys that I actually watched a lot of film on him, and the days when Scott was there and Dorsey and the Julians and all those guys. When I got recruited to Cape Breton, I remember, Coach Chardis being like, "Yeah, we want you to come play for Cape Breton." I remember I looked at the map and I was like, Nova Scotia. Like, I initially in my head, I thought, okay, polar bears, snow, just like, I didn't know anything about Nova Scotia. I didn't even think black people even existed over there, to be honest. And I was just like, when I saw the film and saw like, the guys that were playing there, I'm like, wow, especially some of them were Americans coming over there. I was just confused. But then that was the first time I got a taste of what the Orange Army looked like just through video. Man, we had a lot of amazing Orange Army appearances when I was there, especially in the championship season, but they really had it. The gym was packed. They had the drummers. It looked like a Division I game, like a small college Division I, just how they had it going. And Paris Carter is one of those players, he could catch fire really quickly. And I actually remember watching a game of him actually playing in the NBA, in the Drew League alongside Kevin Durant and Kobe Bryant one summer. And even there, like, he held his own, right? Paris Carter was definitely a player that was, he was good. He was a very good player. Another guy I would have loved to play with. Big, strong body, very good shooter. I didn't know him personally. I've never personally spoken to him, but I did watch a lot of film on him, a lot of stuff on him. And just from what I saw, he was a really good scorer. And he played with some really good teams. And it's hard to be a really good player and stand out on a really good team. And he played on some really good teams. So I think he did his due diligence when he was a Caper. So
our next first team member, probably a lot of debate on this one. I'm being facetious, but certainly a man we touched on throughout this so far, hard not to allude to him, and that was Jimmy Dorsey.
Yeah, I mean, you ask anybody, Jimmy's the best player to ever play at CBU, hands down. It's not, I don't think it's really a debate. I think if he would have, had a 5-year career here, every record that basically exists here, he would have. Multiple time MVP, multiple AUS champ. And I had the privilege of coaching Jimmy for one season. And I think what was so great about him was the first meeting that we ever had. And we were speaking about this the other night. We brought him into a coaches meeting after we had decided who was going to be on the team, and we sat him down. And here I am, a young coach looking at a player who's established himself as one of the best players in the country. And we said, Jimmy, we're going to be making some tough decisions right now. We're going to be cutting some players who are friends of yours that you were close with on the team, because we feel like that's what's best for the program moving forward. And we just want to let you know that first, in case you want to make a decision and that's something that you don't like, and maybe, you don't want to stick around. And he just looked at me right in the eye and he said, Coach, whatever you want to do, I'm with you 100%. And that just made everything so much easier as a coach, to be able to handle him. And we have alluded to it a little bit, but I think that hierarchy within that team just like fell so easily kind of into place. If you think about it, like everybody knew Jimmy was our best player. And then Sean was our emotional leader. And then everybody just kind of fell into place under that. And, talk about a guy who wants the ball in his hands when it mattered. He would get angry, at the coaching staff if he didn't have the ball. He would get I don't think I subbed him off once that year where he wasn't pissed off. Like, I don't like where you would be like, Jimmy, we got to give you 30 seconds or we got to give you a minute break. And he would come off and be like, what are you doing? Like, he wanted to play 40 minutes. He wanted to be out there all the time. He felt like he could have an impact on the game all the time, and he could. I mean, he did it basically. I think if you, spread the numbers out over a 40-minute game, he would essentially have been pretty close to a triple-double while he was here. The MVP season he had when I was coaching, he was like 22, 6 and 6 or something wild. And, for a guy to be able to do that at this level with the pace of play when it was a 30-second shot clock and, a full reset and all that, like, it's just incredible what he did. And, to recall him going 16 for 16 from the free throw line in the AUS championship game, to bring the AUS championship to CBU a few years before when they played at Center 200 here in Cape Breton, where he did the same thing, where he had, a huge game in the championship. He was just, there weren't too many shots that I felt were bad shots that he took. I think as other coaches, or maybe if you were watching, you would say that it was a bad shot. But for Jimmy, for the most part, every shot was a good shot. And I think his teammates trusted him with that as well. Like, obviously, nobody's perfect. And maybe there was the odd shot that you're like, oh, that was a force. But his teammates never got mad at him. Like, his teammates were 100% supportive of him because of what he was doing as a player. And, the year I got to coach him was great. And I know that everybody who did get the chance to coach him here at CBU holds him in that same regard.
To say that Jimmy had the green light when he walked out of the locker room was probably a pretty accurate statement. And I mean, he took some shots and you kind of went, oh boy, but it went in. But I remember when I went on with Matt and Jimmy was in his last year, and I remember going to the gym thinking, okay, now what kind of a guy is this, and what's his reaction going to be to me? I'm just he's going to think I'm just kind of a high school coach guy coming in here, but Jimmy was absolutely a pleasure to coach, coachable, nice guy, would listen. Not that you had to tell Jimmy a lot, but was a real student of the game, a great teammate, a big moment guy. Like Matt said, that championship game when he went 16 for 16 from the line, and to see how much it meant to him. The emotion from Jimmy Dorsey when we won that championship, I remember looking at him going, thinking, man, oh man, this means so much to this guy, right? But a coachable guy, probably a better defender than some people gave him credit for as well. Could play both ends of the floor.
Just a better athlete. I don't think people thought he was a good athlete. He was a great athlete.
Yeah. And the other thing about Jimmy too was that he wasn't all shot. I mean, his assists. I mean, I looked at some of his. Even I was surprised. His assists. Was second all time for the most assists in the season, 159 in 2011, 2012. So he wasn't just a shoot first guy. I mean, obviously that was a big part of his game, but he also could get his teammates involved as well. And I remember I think of him as a glue guy too. Shaq, I'm sure you remember this because you were a big part of it. But the arguments after practice in the stretch or the cool down between yourself and Keon and Jimmy over NBA were legendary. Legendary discussions. But it was one of those things I think brought us together. And Coach Matt really hit it on the head. When you look back at that team and how we just had the right guys in the right spots. It was just one of those things that came together. The job that Coach did to put in that group together, and it was phenomenal. And Jimmy was huge, an all-timer, as Matt said, not arguably, the best caper of all time.
I'm gonna take it a step higher. Jimmy was the icing of the cake on that team. To me, he was the best player in the country, to be honest. In the country, I know the Phillips Scrubs and stuff were good, but you have to understand that Carleton team they had a lot of really good players, and they had to build system. Jimmy was doing things with defenses literally built to stop him, and they couldn't. I remember my most fondest game of Jimmy is the year we went 19-1. we had lost Acadia the year before. We had guys taking off their shoes, throwing shoes, ejections all over the place. It was madness. And we came back the next night, and Jimmy had dropped 37 on them. Jimmy was the Stephen Curry of the U.S. That's what he was. Like, there was no, I never felt bad. Jimmy, I used to tell Jimmy running up the court, I'm like, man, you step up half court, just let that fly. Either I'm gonna get the rebound or it's going in. You know, was literally, I think I lost the most weight ever playing with Jimmy, because I would just run the floor and he would just throw it, I would catch it. We do layup line drills in practice. I would just run, Jimmy would just throw it, I just catch and lay it in. And he knew. Now, if you ever watch some of the old film, you'd see, you know, as soon as I get the rebound, someone get the rebound, I would just take off, because Jimmy knew I was going down and he was going to throw the ball. On the defensive end, had amazing hands, you know, amazing hands to steal the ball, whether it was being in the gap, you know, players driving, Jimmy reaching in, he'd always get those steals. Could finish unbelievably around the rim. One of the best shooters I've ever seen, but the best player I've played with till this day. Jimmy was an NBA talent. Like, I'm going to be honest, like, I played with a lot of guys that were like that either played in the NBA or like had that ability. Jimmy had that ability, especially if Jimmy, I think, took ball even more serious. He was a problem. And I think the biggest thing for Jimmy too, he was just one of those players where he'd walk into a gym and the opposing team would know, okay, Jimmy's playing, Jimmy's here. And the fear Sean instilled a lot of fear in a lot of teams because of his brute force. Jimmy instilled fear because of the play of his game. And he was a threat. You know, at that time, there wasn't another player that you'd had to pick up from half court. And the reason why Steph Curry is so marveled in the NBA, because Steph Curry can do it off the dribble, he can do it standstill, and that's what Jimmy could do. Jimmy could shoot the ball at any given rate, at any given time, and like talk about a guy that could just get buckets. Like, the first time I played Jimmy my first year when I was a baby, we played Acadia, and Jimmy had a game of 49 points, 14 assists, and 9 rebounds, and it was the most outrageous basketball game I ever watched. Acadia was one of the better teams that year, and we actually lost in the semis, St. FX that year, and Jimmy just willed us. Jimmy was phenomenal. There's so much I could say about Jimmy. He was an unbelievable basketball player. Unbelievable.
Yeah, the Oklahoma City Thunder called me about Jimmy.
Yep.
That'll tell you about how good Jimmy was.
Yeah, that's true. I remember that.
I have to put in my career. Oh, go ahead, Ron.
Sorry, Corey, but his career stats too, when you look at the fact that he played 4 years and he's still all over the stat sheet, you know, career-wise. And one that stood out to me, a bit of a trivia question here for Coach Skin, see if you get this one, but Jamie was second in career three-pointers made with 218. He was second. The guy who leads has 220, and would have been a guy that I think Matt played against and now has a very prestigious coaching job elsewhere. Do we know who that is, Matt?
Scotty?
That'd be Scott Morrison. Yeah, Scott had 220 career threes, and Jimmy's second with 218. But again, in 75 games, you know, 4 seasons, right? Incredible.
Of course, Scott Morrison now in the system with the Boston Celtics in the NBA, as most of us know. I just want to put in my little 2 cents on Jimmy Dorsey. And again, it's from that spot as an announcer when I did the St. FX games, of course, as Ron and Matt know, it's a spot right by the visitors bench as well. And so that was always fun to hear the other team throughout the game. But what I remember, and I saw games and all the teams, of course, coming in, and players get hot, of course, and you say, oh, they're on a roll. But what separated Jimmy Dorsey was, and I think even the crowd, even the X-Men, there were a couple of games, classic games, probably some of the best I've seen, that you knew he took over the game and you knew you wouldn't be able to stop him. There was they were going to win the game because Jimmy Dorsey was just took over. And I know you hear that a lot, so-and-so took over the game, but there were a couple of games, it's just like, you know, they can't stop him. And there's no way they're going to stop him. And, you know, unless something upends things, that the Capers are going to win the game. So just phenomenal. Very few players, I think, reach that level where it's just like, well, what do we do? And I often saw the legendary Coach K, that look on his face is like, we can't we can't stop this guy.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add one more point. And I was kind of reminiscing with Coach Skin the other day. I remember against St. FX in our first year with Jimmy, my first year with Jimmy, we were actually down like 20 that game. And I was rewatching the game about a night or two ago, and how Jimmy was able to will us back in that game and hit like big shot after big shot after big shot after layup. It was ridiculous that fourth quarter watching what he was doing. And like it was one of those games where like we couldn't stop St. FX. They kept scoring. Like they kept scoring. And it didn't matter. And one of my favorite stories of Jimmy was Jimmy came back to come play to the NBL, as you guys know, with the Cape Breton Highlanders. Didn't end up staying because he had to leave. I heard he came in 25 pounds overweight. And my older brother was at the team that time. And I told him, oh, Jimmy's going to come. Jimmy's going to come. I didn't know if Jimmy's going to be in shape or not. My brother literally told me, he's like, this dude, whoever he is, came in and killed everyone in training camp. He killed everyone. He was dropping bombs, and he was out of shape. I'm like, I wish you guys saw him when we played, because he was that good. He had personal reasons why he couldn't end up playing, but like Jimmy was different. That's all I can say. Jimmy was different.
So we'll go with our final first team member. And we're going to get a first-hand perspective, which is great. Of course, it's Meshach. Matt, one of the, no doubt, some no-brainers on these teams, but certainly Meshach as a first-team player, an easy choice to make.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I think we've talked a lot about how players have progressed and changed over their time while they've been at CBU. And I bet Meshach will say this a little bit about himself when he gets there. If Meshach knew what he knew now when he was a player here, or when he was 18 years old, he wouldn't have played at CBU. I mean, what I mean by that is that we got fortunate because of the level of player that he was and that he became. And he was just figuring things out, because he was so young, and he, was figuring out how to be a person, how to be a player, and, how we talked to him about, working on his body and pushing himself to be better, et cetera, et cetera. And it took him time, just like everybody else, to figure all of that stuff out for himself. And like I said, we're actually fortunate, because if he would have known what he knows now, he would have been playing at like in the Big Ten somewhere, or in the NCAA. But how Meshach developed, over time as a person, as a student, as a player, to me, it's a story that I tell to basically every recruit that we have. And we're fortunate that Meshach stays so involved that I let him share that experience with recruits as well. And he is always open to talking to people and sharing his time. And I was extremely hard on Meshach. Like, I was extremely hard on him. I look back on it and I feel bad how hard I was on him at times, because there were times where he didn't know how good he was. He just didn't know it. And I think the time that sticks out the most, and probably for him too, is we played 2 games in PEI one year. And I think he had like 2 rebounds in 2 games or something like that. And I just couldn't believe it. Like, it was just one of those things where I just couldn't believe it as a coach, where, this man who is so big and so strong and so dominant, that could happen. But the best thing about Meshach is he probably hated me a lot while he was here. He probably, listen, like I said, I feel bad about that, but he probably hated me a lot. But the biggest thing that I respect about Meshach, and I think this is why we're so close, and we basically talk every day still, the reason why he became what he is because no matter if he hated me or if he hated what was going on, he stuck to it. And it wasn't just about putting his head down and getting through it, because I think that's the worst thing that people can do. You can't just put your head down and plow through. That's a myth. He always had a plan. he always knew where he was going. He always had an idea of what he wanted to be. And so how he was able to handle that criticism and take it and use it in whatever way he could to become a positive has made him the man that he is today, and a proud CBU alumni. And like I said, he's one of my all-time favorite players.
Well, ditto to all of that. And, you know, besides being arguably the best big man of all time in CBU and a perennial all-star, I just want to touch a bit on his community work. Mm-hmm. Community legend here in Cape Breton.
For sure.
To see the work that Meshach did here with the children, with the kids in camps, and how the people that came to games loved him. I would have to say, arguably the most loved player ever in my time involved with CBU basketball. I mean, a big teddy bear sometimes. I know him and I remember you say to him a couple of times, Meshach, I'd like to kick you in the shin as hard as we can just before tip off, just to get you mad, get you fired up, you know, get those work boots on, right, Meshach? Get out there and go. But an all-timer. I mean, his on-court stuff speaks for itself, but to see how he's grown and matured as a man, as a person, and the values that he carries so dearly with him in life, you know, and his faith, how important it is to him. I remember, you know, a couple of times people say, oh, my heavens, you work with that men's basketball team. What's it like with them on the road? Are they hard to handle? And I would say, well, not really. They're easier than high school guys or girls because they were committed. But oftentimes I'd go to knock on the doors. Like that was one of the old guy jobs that coach gave me. I'd be tucking the guys in at night doing a room check. And I never, ever, not one time had an issue with anybody ever. And oftentimes Meshach would be there tucked in bed reading his Bible before he went to sleep. And people wouldn't believe that, but it speaks to the type of guy he is. And again, and absolutely will go down in the annals of CBO basketball as the most loved guy ever, for sure. And we still love him. We still love him, Meshach.
For sure.
Love you guys too. You guys said a lot. Yeah, my time at CBU was amazing, to be honest. And I'm not a guy that likes to sugarcoat a lot of stuff. Like, I remember coming in as a young kid and 18 years old and just like, you know, being placed on that team with Charters was a nightmare. You know, some of the most disrespectful players I've ever played with, just Tom Gillespie took over, and it was just bad. And I actually didn't want to come back that year. They brought in a bunch of coaches stuff, a coaching pool to coaches to work out us. And Matt Skin was one of them. And I remember I knew nothing about Matt Skin and nothing about him other than kind of what Cedric told me. One of the first things he wanted me to do was to dunk the ball, because when I was so younger, to be honest, I never saw myself as a basketball player. And I remember we did a drill where Matt would put the ball down. We'd have to run and grab the ball at the free throw line and go and make a move. And I ended up dunking the ball. I believe it was on AJ. And I surprised myself. That right there was like the deal breaker for me to bring in Matt, because at that time, I think the returning players was myself, AJ, Kelson, Jimmy, and a couple of the other guys. And Coach John Ryan, the AD, had come up to me and said, like, what do you think about Matt? I'm like, we need him. You know, young, fiery coach. I'm like, he's getting me to dunk. Nah, let's bring him over here, right? First year, obviously, I actually didn't start my first year for most of the games. AJ had started. And honestly, I enjoyed the role because I was able to come off the bench and punish some of the second unit bigs. But as the season went on, Coach Skin gave me more and more and more confidence, to the point I was, you know, starting in the AUS playoffs. Wasn't an all-star that year. Had gotten AUS all-star. We won the chip, obviously. And that year, I think we had a lot of team success. The next 3 years was more, we still had team success, but I think a lot of the things fell more on my shoulders. And I always tell this to people, other than my parents, there has been nobody that has yelled my name like Coach Skin has. I lost track. I lost count. You could probably make one of those like auto-tune music videos of how many times Matt Skin would yell my name. but he was the only person that could bring out that type of fire in me. And like Coach Skin said, if I knew now what I knew back then, I mean, I still would have stayed at CBU, to be honest, but I think I would have been just even more dominant than I was there at the time. And a lot of ups and downs, you know, a lot of games when it was tough. I remember against my last year, I had one of my worst games. We just had a game where like things were just flowing, and then Katie just caught fire out of nowhere in the end. We lost that game, and that's probably the first time I've ever cried in front of a human being ever. Was with Matt, Coach Matt, and right there I realized how much deeper our relationship was, just not with basketball. And I knew he could be a coach and a friend that I was able to trust. And, you know, I've played 4 years of pro basketball. I've talked to Matt through every single season, asked him for advice, you know, asked him different questions. He's the only coach, to be honest, out of any coach I've played with, was coaching me that I stayed in consistent contact with. And for him to have me speak to the recruits itself is an honor as well. And being a proud CBU alumni, my time at Cape Breton was amazing. Sometimes, you know, I'll just be sitting around overseas and I make jokes with Matt. And I'm like, man, I hope this pandemic, they allow some eligibility back, you know, because, you know, when people hear Cape Breton, they talk about the campus. I don't think they understand how loving it is there. You know, the small campus, having the teachers be able to know you. Like at my time at Cape Breton, it was like, I know everyone talks about the Division I experience, but for me there, it was a blur, and it was amazing. I enjoyed every single year that I was there. And, you know, like I said, Matt being tough on me was probably the best things to happen to me in life in general, not just as a player, but as a person, because, you know, he gave me a lot of perspective. We had a lot of meetings in his office. I think he just wanted to bring the best out of me. And ultimately, I think he did. So.
We spoke about all these players, and that's the 10 of them, and our first and second teams guys. And Matt, and I know you focus on this so much, and when you reminisce, of course, it's on the court memories and accomplishments and statistics, but just the accomplishments and the mark that um, these men left on the program and on the community, and I guess consummate student athletes.
I mean, like I said, that's what we hope for. We want to be a character-based program. We say that brown nosers don't get along with underachievers, and underachievers don't get along with brown nosers, right? So we want guys who have high character, and we're going to keep pushing for that every year. And you know, we're hoping that we can keep bringing in talented character players that can bring us to another AUS championship, because I'm not really going to sleep well until that happens again.
Mm-hmm. Looking at the past decade and you folks chatting about this team and the members of it, obviously brings back memories, and you touched on them throughout this morning, particular games, particular moments, but it's been quite a decade. Obviously, in 10 years, you'd love to be talking about 10 AUS championships. Of course, every program would, but the success and the titles and all those things, and the building and kind of the rebirth of the program, a lot to be proud of.
The last thing I'll say is there was some evaluation done over the past couple of months that was rehashing the best university programs in the country over the past 20 years or something like that. And they ranked them, or it might have even been the past decade as well. And we were like 15th or something like that in the country, something along the lines. And I think that speaks a lot, very highly of where we are as a program and what we do here. John Ryan says it the best. We like to fight above our weight class. We're a small school in a smaller city, and we don't have every academic program that every university has, but we have 4 incredibly successful athletic programs here, and I am a proud Caper every single day that I step into this office.
Ron, you have a nice perspective as well, of course, being part of basketball in Cape Breton for for so many years, and both at the minor high school levels, and now your involvement with CBU. But you could certainly reflect on how this program has evolved. Certainly, again, a lot to be proud of for fans and supporters of the CBU men's program.
Oh, for sure. I know when Matt called me, his first stint at CBU, and he had called about the fact that he was applying, and we talked about that and what the interview might be like. And then, of course, he called me to say, he had gotten the job, and he said, well, "What do you think?" And I said, "That's awesome, and I'm really proud of you." And he said, "No, what do you think? What do you really think?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, will you come with me? Help me out?" And I said, it's kind of it took me back a bit. I wasn't really expecting that, but I got to say it's been a fantastic journey. I've learned so much from him, and so much from the players as well. I mean, as a coach, and I think as a person, if you don't have that attitude of being a lifelong learner, you're going to get left behind in a hurry, right? So to see how things have evolved, how the program has come along, how it's been reborn a second time under Coach Skin. I said it's extremely satisfying. I'm very proud of him. And Matt and I have a very, very close relationship. I had the pleasure of coaching Matt when he was a player at CBU, and Bill Burns was head coach. Matt was one of our prize recruits that Bill had brought in, and so we've been together a long time. And also want to mention Matt's impact on the local community too, and his respect of the local high school kids. You see him at all the high school games in the gym, even if there's maybe nobody there that really is recruiting at that time. Matt's there in the gym watching the games as a presence, representing the program, and that's so important. And I think over the years, now we look at some of the guys who have come through locally who've had some success. Of course, we talked about Kelson. Now we've got young Jason Callahan, who's turned out to be a real gem for us. We have another young guy in this year locally named Mitchell Mercer, who checks all the boxes, and we're very excited about. And our reach is far. We've even got a young man from Port Hood, part of our program, who's a legit part of our program. A young man named Noah Dunn, who brings a whole lot to the table. And so when you look at all that, it's satisfying for me to have been fortunate to be a part of it, and I'm very proud of the journey that Coach Matt has brought me on.
Shaq, any final thoughts on whether it's the team, your time at CBU, and maybe while you do that, update our fans on what you're doing now? I know no doubt COVID interrupted, but where you're at with your career and such now as well.
So I just want to touch on two things. Before I touch on my career, I want to touch a little bit on the coaching staff at CBU. It's good to see familiar faces, always with Coach Matt and Coach Ron, and Coach Billy as well was an integral part of that year as well. It's amazing because I don't think Coach King gets the respect that he deserves as a coach. And I think why he should be nominated as Coach of the Year every year is because simply when he left, Cape Breton had a 2-20 record, I believe, in 2 years. They struggled. They struggled a lot. And not only did he leave and go to Calgary, they won a national chip there. And there are a couple of players that I ended up playing there with. One of them was Mambi. He played with me overseas, and Mambi raved about Coach Ken. So for him to go over there for that year or two, have the impact he had there, win a national championship, I mean, what more is there for him to do, right? He could have stayed there, but I think, the Caper pride and blood that, runs through his veins, he came back and turned the program around. I mean, their first season back coaching this fresh new bunch of team, they actually went to the semifinals, right? Last year, I believe they could have won the chip as well. They fell short on the tough buzzer beater by Marcus Masters. But I think even with our team, the years I was there, we had injuries every year. I think there was one injury I had with my foot. I missed almost half the year. Other guys injured, sitting out. And we were a playoff team every year. And not only that, 1 year we were nationally ranked. And, we were a problem. Everyone feared us. And I think it started with Matt. It started with Coach Skin's fire. Coach Ron was always there, to support us. Matt Skin was so fiery that, to the point where like sometimes, he didn't have the patience to talk to his players. And he'd send Ron. I remember Ron would come over to me a couple of times and speak to me. And one of my favorite all-time coaches was Billy as well. And my favorite moment I remember of Billy is when he threw my shoes in practice in the middle of the floor, because I used to get fouled a whole lot. I won't talk about that, but and I just never complained, because one thing that was engraved in my mind from both coaches was work boots. And that's something that I've taken with me even in my pro career. Just, like, you can do whatever you want, but as soon as you step in between those lines, it's your job essentially now. Getting paid for it, you got to look at it in a different perspective. You don't have time to build a team for 5 years. It's something that it could be year to year. So I don't think I've properly thanked the coaching staff just for having the faith in me, having the trust in me, allowing me to be on this. So I'm really appreciative of it, and I just thank both you guys, Coach Ron and Matt Skin, for the opportunity. And to update the fans.
Oh, you left me, Shaq. There you are.
Oh, to update the fans, I did take some time off because of COVID, and a lot was going on. But my agency in January, actually, what they're thinking of doing, depending on how everything goes, is so someone keeps calling me, is flying me over to LA. So my agency, they have a lot of G League contacts, a lot of like different teams in that. And I don't know if the G League is going to happen this year, but he had wanted me to fly me over there for 2 weeks and just bring me through some camps and stuff like that. If it doesn't work, I think I'm going to end up going to Finland in January. That is the plan. Mombi was actually over there playing. I think he's coming home right now just because everything is increasing. But it's obviously a day-to-day basis, because it could be good this week and next week it could be really bad, because from a lot of players, what I'm hearing is they're going to hit a huge COVID uprising in Europe. So for me, I really took in this time to work on my body. Like Coach Matt said, if I knew now what I knew then, health has become a massive part of of who I am. Eating, sleeping, especially. I don't think players understand that in terms of recovery and stuff. So that's where I'm going. I still have a lot of more years and potential and room to grow and play. So that's basically my focus and what I want to do as an athlete. And, I'll continue to be a global ambassador for Cape Breton, as long as I'm able to. So
gentlemen, just to go through our all-decade team again, the second team, Sean McCormick, Kenny Jean-Louis, Scott Jasper Sayer, Cedric Casongo, and Kelson Devereaux. And our first team, Paul Watson, Osman Omar, Paris Carter, Jimmy Dorsey, and Meshach Lufile. So again, quite a lineup. Matt and Ron, you wouldn't mind taking that 10 on the road for an AUS and the U Sports Championship.
That's a national team. That's a national championship team every year. No debate.
So great. Thanks again to everyone for watching this edition of our Caper Varsity Sports All-Decade Team, the men's basketball edition. Thanks to assistant coach Ron Shaw, one of the best, a legend certainly in Cape Breton basketball. Matt Skin, of course, head coach and former Caper player, and one of our first team All-Stars and now pro player doing the Capers and Cape Breton proud, rather, Meshach Lufile. So again, thanks everyone for watching. I'm Corey LeBlanc. Take care.